Hello, everybody. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Georgiana.
And this is Wholehearted Loving, where we teach you simple tools for self-love and compassion to grow the muscles you need to be with big feelings, triggers, and overwhelming sensations in your body.
Whether you have active challenges in your life or relationships, or whether you're just here to learn to be kinder to yourself, we pull out all the little things that make life feel better, the things that give you a sense of hope and direction.
So if you're too hard on yourself or on others,
if you want to feel real, deep connection in your life and relationships,
even if you want to reprogram your inner critic while you're sleeping,
this is a great place to be.
So welcome, and we hope this episode brings you just the tidbit you needed today.
Enjoy the show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wholehearted Loving. Today we're going to be talking about limiting meanings that we've given to things which are optional. I'm going to use an example that came up for me in the last couple of weeks, which is free will. You can find self-reflection prompts for this episode and every episode on our Instagram at Wholehearted Loving, and you can learn more about us and how you can practice with us live on our website at wholeheartedloving.com. Before we get started, we are going to do a body-based self-connection practice to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other in this podcast.
I'm like, oh man, I had a plan. I had a plan on which practice we were going to do. And then my body just started doing things.
Typical.
So I always feel like the body is wise. Our bodies are wise. So if this came up for me, this is, I think, what we're meant to do. Yeah. Which, how do you describe what I'm doing?
We are sort of saucily lifting one shoulder and then the other.
Yeah, so it's like lifting the right. While I lift the right shoulder, I lower the left.
Yes.
Is that what I'm doing?
Yep. Yeah.
It's like a little shoulder wiggle.
Yeah.
And when it first started and came, it had a little playful energy. So if you want to play along, see if you can create some wiggles with your shoulders. And notice what it feels like to create wiggles in your shoulders from a little bit of a playful energy versus like a mechanical energy.
Mm.
Right? Like I'm just trying to move my right shoulder up while my left goes down. It's more like a thinking, and there's this way it's supposed to be done. And just notice how that feels in the body. I noticed Steph's face, like your face totally changed as you shifted. Right? And then maybe shift again to something a little bit more with playful energy.
Oh, yeah. The playful wiggle, I don't know why. I'll just describe what comes to me. The playful wiggle is a cat, and the mechanical wiggle is a stairmaster.
Your face matches that too.
Yeah.
Right. But it's so neat how a very simple body movement and also the energy that we bring into it has the ability to totally change how we feel. The expression on our face totally changes.
Yeah.
Huh.
And so this is also my point of the thing that's been plaguing me for 2 weeks, which is the idea of free will. Mm-hmm. And I could go on philosophically and metaphysically about free will at length, but that's not really why we're here. We want to make this a relatable concept. So the overarching concept is that I had this idea of what free will meant, and then I encountered another idea of what free will meant, which was so much more helpful for me. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how we're going to frame this. But what you're describing right now kind of encapsulates this concept, right? Mm-hmm. We're wiggling, right? We've decided with our free will that we're going to wiggle.
Yeah.
And there's different ways we can do that. There's different intentionality we can attach to it, which will cause our experience to be completely different. So maybe I can give you a little rundown of what's been in my mind about this in the last week, and then you can make it make sense for our audience.
Fantastic. I mean, I particularly loved how we came on this topic where Steph says, hey, let's chat about something. And you said, do you ever think about free will? And my immediate response was, no, I really don't. And then I sat with it for a moment. I'm like, well, perhaps I do. And I just don't frame it as free will.
Yeah.
And so very quickly, it became clear to me how what those words might mean for me
Mm-hmm.
and how it makes sense for me. And so we'll get to all that. But it was just neat to see like something that you feel plagued by. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I don't think about that at all.
Don't think about that at all.
And then realizing with a little bit of like pause, like, oh, maybe I do think about that thing, but I don't frame it as free will.
Right.
And
which is another beautiful microcosm of the problem, right? I make these words mean one thing, you make them mean another thing.
mm-hmm. And so if you are like Steph and you are plagued by the thought of free will, then this podcast episode could be for you. And if you're like me and you're like, no, I do not sit and think about free will, then this podcast could be for you also.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's a good combination. Free will, and tell me if I'm wrong, everybody on Earth, did you think of it as meaning you can do whatever you want? You can always do whatever you want? Is that how you think of free will, G?
So free will. So the immediate response, and it's a body thing too, not just a mind thing, is yes. And there's a yes and or yes but.
Right.
Like it's a, well, yes, but obviously there's some constraints and like not just external constraints, but just internal like knowings of where there will be some limitation to
limitations.
That.
Yeah. So that's what was plaguing me, that part. Like, I'm like, well, there's free will, but so then is it really free will, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I started thinking in terms of Western esoteric mysticism and the Limerics and Aleister Crowley, who is an old magician that I wonder if anybody listening knows about.
I have no idea who that is, in case you also don't.
Yeah. One of his famous sayings is, do what thou wilt, be the whole of the law. So there's different ways of thinking about that as well, right? Whatever you will is the whole of the law. So the point of this is that I'm thinking then of will in different terms. I'm thinking of it more as an active thing than as a passive thing. So my brain started saying, oh, well, maybe free will doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. It means you are free to direct your tremendous will and focus and energy at whatever you want. Yeah. And that little reframe for me made like all the difference in the world. If I had understood instead of, oh, you can do whatever you want, which I find overwhelming and also a lie, versus you are free to direct your will at whatever you choose. That feels like super empowering to me and something I can do something with, and it makes sense, and it just feels better in my person and kind of gives me some direction and agency.
I love that. So maybe we can rewind a little bit and slow down a little bit and like take little pieces out of here, if that's okay. Because my curious brain immediately went to like, so what? Like, who cares how you define free will? Right? And so my curiosity led me to ask you like, well, this old definition you gave to free will, how was it impacting your life in a way that didn't feel supportive and maybe felt more limiting to you or felt actually sort of overwhelming? So could you say more about like how you understood free will to be before, while it was sort of plaguing you? And in what way did it feel limiting or overwhelming to you to hold that definition of free will?
Yeah, so there's my personal experience with it, and then there's my social experience with it. The personal experience is just overwhelming. And when there's confusion, so like the element of, well, yeah, I feel like there's free will, but also that feels like there's limitations and we're not acknowledging that. I find that to be a bit immobilizing. When there's confusion or overwhelm by way of too many choices, I can find that overwhelming and immobilizing. And then I find it frustrating. So I like watching people talk about things on YouTube. Like I'll just sit and listen to people have conversations about ideas, right? And free will is one that is often debated in philosophy, and it drives me bonkers. Something I find very difficult in life is when people can't come to a common understanding about ideas and words and terminology. So that's kind of how I got into it. So it's frustrating socially, and then it's personally a bit immobilizing.
Okay. And then my curiosity takes me to, like, can you share with us, like, what did immobilizing look like? Like, how did it immobilize you in your life in a practical sense of, like, when you held this belief that, like, well, we have free will, but do we really? And if we have free will, I must have so many choices. Now I'm so overwhelmed, I can't make any choices. Like, how did that show up in your life?
Yeah, too many choices just make me sit down and do nothing. So any way of honing that, even if I'm fooling myself, even if it's like, okay, I have every choice, start writing all those every choices down. And I can narrow it just by the fact of writing things down. And that becomes less immobilizing. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe I'm thinking even another layer deeper. Like, did it mean, like, hey, what career choice should I make? Holy crap, I have no idea because I could be anything and do anything. Or, like, where should I live? I don't know, because free will, I could live anywhere. So I'm not even going to think about it at all.
Yeah. It almost gets into this realm of, like, shoulds. Like, if I have every option, then what should I do? Do I need other people's input? Do I need to gather a bunch of information? It sort of takes away this element that feels really important to me of being directed by flow and the moment. Of course, I could narrow down free will in that very context. I can go, well, I'm free to do anything I want within what feels true of this moment. And I think that's kind of what I had come to naturally. But this mental reframe I found really helpful in terms of understanding. Like, I figured out how to operate within what I felt was a giant misunderstanding in my mind. But now I feel like I can operate and I have a clearer, more helpful understanding for myself.
Yeah. So, like, what I'm sensing is you held this belief or definition about free will, and you carried it throughout your life for many decades. And you started to notice the definition is so broad and vague. It sort of leaves me a little bit swirly to the point that I have some stuckness, stillness. I don't do anything. And what I'm hearing is you notice, hey, when you make it smaller and it's a little bit more defined, there's something in you that's like, oh, I can work with this. This feels a little bit more comfortable. I can find some direction here.
Yeah.
And, like, what that makes me think of is how we choose to view things and define things for ourselves, and noticing when is the way I'm seeing this or defining this so broad and vague that it doesn't feel like I'm anchored and have a place to go from here. And when does the way I'm seeing something feel so limited that I feel like stuck and like there's no ways to go? I feel like I have no choices. And a different way that we would talk about this, you and I, is like growing the skill to notice, when do I need to widen the lens and when do I need to narrow the lens in order to help me feel a little bit more grounded and supported to make the next choice that's helpful for me.
Yeah.
Right. And did you want to say something?
Yeah, like coming to a place of pause enough with your body that you can notice that some of that is happening internally, you know? I think it's taken me something like 40 years to notice that that was happening for me. And now I can apply that to other things. You know, when I have that feeling of something being too big and confusing, I can notice that. And letting that personal experience for me be okay. You know, like you and I could be walking down the street and someone could mention free will, and for you, it will have no effect. And for me, my brain explodes, you know, and we're still together relating in that place. And I need to be able to work with that.
Well, I think this is a really key point that we don't talk about enough, just in general as people. We think words mean the same thing to everybody. And they don't. They don't. We define them differently. We carry a different lived experience up until today. And so it's colored differently. Our minds just work and are wired differently. So I think it's so important that when we're, especially the people we're in relationship with, and we want to co-create a great life together, a great working relationship together, a friendship together, or just work on a project together, that we actually get clear on, like, what do you mean? You're using these words, but what does it mean to you? And be able to stay curious and be able to come with the knowing that it's possible we are not actually talking about the same thing. So could we first define what we're talking about here together? And it reminds me of a recent, I think, session I did with a client where I was getting that sense. I'm like, I sense that you're telling me something that you and your partner talk about, but you are actually talking about two very different things. Is that a possibility? Could we look at that? She's like, oh, okay. I'm like, is it possible that you view this as XYZ and he might be viewing those same words as this, and that? She's like, holy crap, I never considered that. Yeah. We haven't really talked about what we mean by those words. Yeah. Right? So I think that's a really great thing to start practicing, is just checking in with each other. Like, hey, I'm saying these words and I'm meaning this. Is that what you're getting from me? Do you give those words the same meaning? Can we start making sure we're speaking the same language first?
Yeah. And right. So you're talking about two people, and I want people also to bring that in to the parts of ourselves, right? So I have many people inside of myself, and one of them can notice, hey, like, did you notice your brain exploded when you heard those words? Like, what are you making those words mean? And could it possibly mean something different?
Yeah. So what you're talking about here is, I'm going to speak of agency. The agency, we have the choice to examine how we view things and how we define things for ourselves. And to notice, is the way I'm defining this or viewing this situation or this phrase or what's happening right now, am I defining it in a way that feels supportive for myself or limiting and overwhelming? And if it's limiting and overwhelming, does that feel good for you? Are you okay with that? Because if you are, it's totally fine. But if you're like, well, actually, I would love to be able to at least explore another option or several options where it could possibly mean something more supportive, right? Then we want to grow that muscle of practicing that. You know, what could this mean that maybe is more supportive, tips me over into the realm of possibility a little bit more instead of limitation and overwhelm.
Yeah. Yeah. So really, you know, we started this episode, and the way I described it to you is that I'd been plagued by these thoughts for 2 weeks. Another way of looking at that is that actually my self was giving me what I needed. I noticed that I was having this way of thinking about free will, and another part of me supplied more information that I had in the frame of this Aleister Crowley quote, which I then was able to relate back to the work that we do. So just another magician nerdy aside, do what thou wilt be the whole of the law. I took that to mean, and I think a lot of people take that to mean, that you're the boss. You know, your will is all there is, like you're in charge. And when I put it in a more compassionate, grounded context, what it comes to mean to me is your will is what creates your world. You know, it's not the law, it's what becomes of your creation. What you focus on, right, what you direct your energy to, becomes your world.
So I would love to play with this on a body level. Are you open to that?
Yeah.
So we'll come back to what you landed on as your reframe. Your will is, what did you say? Your will is something about
becomes your
the reality you create. Becomes your experience. Okay. Can we park that for a second, go backwards to what did free will mean to you before? If you could sum it up in one sentence, right? Your definition. And then what I'd love for you to try doing is say that out loud. Free will means, or whatever, however you want to say that. And just track how it feels in your body to speak of that old belief, that using that old definition, what happens in your body as you say it out loud.
Mm-hmm. I love this. So free will means you can do anything. I notice there's a big old no in here. I started by wanting to make a snarky, you can do anything.
Yeah, I saw that in your face. I heard it in your tone.
Yeah.
I'm like, she doesn't believe that.
No. So it's this fake power. It's like when people are like, I'm awesome. And there's like, that's a good thing to say and think, but you have to feel it and believe it. And so, yeah, it feels like a trite earworm for people. Free will, you can do whatever you want.
Great. So that's all we did. Like, it's not to say like it's a trite thing. It's just that's how you experience it in your body as you say that definition out loud. So if we were to like, oh, let's wiggle actually, just shake that off a little bit and find a little reset. And when you're ready, maybe you want to feel your butt on the seat or just get a little bit connected to body. The new belief I hold about free will is, right? And if you were to say that out loud and also track your body and just notice how your body responds to that.
Oh, it's so much better already just thinking about it. My new definition of free will is that we are free to focus our energy and attention, and that will create our reality.
And
that feels like a line of truth going down my midsection. It feels calm and grounded. I detect zero snark in my energy. I don't feel the need to argue or ask questions or say but.
Right. Yeah. And when you imagine being guided in your life by that new belief, like what feeling comes up for you? Your face smiled.
Yeah.
Like a really genuine smile, a different smile than that earlier smile that was the snark smile. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels, I'll just say the words that come, like a magic carpet. It feels like smooth sailing on a magic carpet ride.
I love it. So I want to highlight here. Well, I want to give you time to linger in this and enjoy that feeling, right? Because like smooth sailing on a carpet ride, for some of us might feel like really soothing and like a big yay. For others, it might be like a little terrifying and weird, but like you are obviously experiencing that as a supportive imagination right now, right? So enjoy that if you'd like to. And then I want to highlight like how this is so personal. It's not black and white because your new definition of free will could be something that another person hears and feels mortified by. Like that feels so overwhelming to me that what I choose a focus and that creates my reality and I'm freaking responsible for all of that. Holy crap, I don't want it. Right? But for you, in this season of your life today, that belief gives you that sturdy feeling as well as a magic carpet ride feeling. Yeah. And you experience that to be pleasant and supportive, and that's what matters. So how people define things in a way that feels good for them doesn't have to be the definition you take on for yourself if that doesn't feel supportive for you.
Yeah. This is reminding me of an explanation my mother will use when she doesn't understand what a person is doing, just to fold it into her reality. And her explanation is just, they're crazy or they're on drugs. You know, that's it. I don't understand it.
Those
That's
are the only
crazy.
options.
That's drugs, right? And it's so neat, all the meaning we make and how quickly that happens and how we're all just trying to get along and feel like we can do this thing called life.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I've really learned to grow this muscle from you and from our friend Shalina of being curious about people's thought processes and their beliefs, especially ones that initially make my stomach turn. Not because I feel like I need to believe them and that they hold the truth, or I want to argue with them and fight my position, but just to understand, like, where is this person coming from? What's their lived experience that's caused them to define it in this way? Mm-hmm. Right? Because I think I also came out of family of origin and life with a little bit of like, well, they must be crazy or on drugs. Like, maybe not the on drugs part, that wouldn't have, but like, that's a messed up way to think about things. Because I think I was taught in my home, there's only one right way.
Yeah.
And so if you assume there's only one right way, then yeah, the reasons will be in your mind. They're crazy, they're on drugs, whatever, they're brainwashed, whatever the thing is. And I noticed that doesn't feel pleasant for me to hold that belief about that's what's going on with people in the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Since we were talking about, the wiggles are coming back. Since we were talking about how we can be two people who define things differently, I thought maybe I could share how I define free will.
Yes, please.
Okay. So immediately when you said, do you sit and think about free will? I said, no, I really do not. And then something in my body was like, no, but I think you really actually do. You just don't use those words to talk about that concept. So the words that come from me, the first one I wrote down, the first one that came to me was agency. And then very quickly after that was choice. Like, I have choice. I have a sense of agency over what I pay attention to, what meaning I give it, what I choose to do. And then the next thing that came for me was, and there's cause and effect. I can do whatever I want, technically. And I will have to live with the cause and effect of that choice. And what I'm learning repeatedly in life every day is to notice, is that a cause and effect that I can live with, that I'm okay with? And I've tried to raise my boys that way too, of like, we don't need to define things as bad and wrong, shameful or not, good or bad, because I grew up that way, where everything was just very categorized like that, and categorized in a way that felt limiting and wrong making, where you just feel bad about yourself. And I like introducing the idea of, what happens when you choose that? What happens when you choose to think about it that way? What happens when you choose to see it that way? What happens when you choose to do it that way? And are you okay with what happens? Is that something that, I think Dan Savage, he used the term like price of admission. Is that worth it to you? Is that price of admission something you're willing to pay? Right? And it's a great measure for ourselves of, am I okay with thinking this way, seeing this way, defining things this way, doing things this way? And if I'm not okay with that, in what way can I tweak that so it does feel like something I'm okay with?
Yeah.
So when I think of free will in that frame, it's a very like, my body feels very sturdy and like solid, but not like I'm in some stuck like cage feeling. It's like, hey, I have a basis and a foundation, and within that foundation, I know there's room for movement and nuance. And what I define as I'm okay with today might change for tomorrow or next month or in 5 years. I'm also okay with that. So I find that this way of like looking at free will feels very spacious, like in lots is possible, and also very, what's the word? Like it's like, we've talked about this before. The gutter rails, the guardrails in the bowling alley.
Yeah. Right.
Right? There's some, I don't know, something there to contain you and be like, oh, like we don't want to chuck it 4 lanes down to the right.
Yes.
But within this, container, there's a lot of room to move here.
Yeah. That's such a great analogy, because first I want to highlight how beautiful it is that you're such a practical person and I'm such a like etheric, I don't know, I'm up in the ethers thinking about philosophy, and you're like, what's the impact? Like practical day to day. I'm like, who cares? We're talking about ideas, and we can come to this common ground. And like, I think that's so missing in society right now, and with political divides and whatever, you can think about things in totally different ways and also come to an understanding with each other that's so beautiful and helpful. And your bowling lane analogy is exactly perfect. With my previous definition of free will, it was a bowling alley of like infiniteness. Like there's no lane. You've just got this ball and you're meant to hit pins that are everywhere. What? Like, please give me some guardrails and a lane.
Please give me some guardrails and a lane. And noticing that the guardrails and a lane that might feel comfortable for you might not be the same ones that are comfortable for me. But I also know I would like some guardrails and a lane too, because I don't want to imagine bowling balls being chucked at my head, right? Or me being like, should I try to hurl this one over there?
Oh
And I don't know what's going to happen.
Infinite 3D bowling. It's like a
yeah.
nightmare.
So this reminds me, and I don't know if it's like ties to exactly what we've been talking about most recently, but earlier in our conversation, what came to mind is how we can often feel too overwhelmed when there's too many choices. And it reminds me of something that I encountered when my kids were young. And, as a parent, you want to give your kids options and you want to give them things to experience. And like, this is just a simple example with toys. So the toy shelf was like full of all sorts of neat things for them to explore. And then slowly what we noticed, and like you talk to anyone who works with young kids, and I think most people will tell you this. Too many choices creates these bored children who sit and like don't know what to do.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Because it's so overwhelming. It's like, do I play with that? Do I play with that? I don't really know. And so like, I just do nothing, just complain that I'm bored, or I just annoy the crap out of you because I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
And one way to play with that is take out the 25 other toys and leave 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, those 2 or 3 seem interesting. There's more like your eyes can actually see more when there's less around, right? And so, the magic of not overwhelming ourselves with too many choices and knowing you and I at least, live in a place in the world, we live in a time in the world where we have the luxury and privilege of a lot of choice, right? And knowing how you can either widen that lens or narrow that lens in a way that feels supportive for you, instead of creating stuckness and immobilization and overwhelm.
Yeah.
And a very practical example in how we do this work with people is when we ask people, well, what do you sense your body needs right now? And that's a key question we ask people, because we want to support people in connecting more deeply with their body wisdom, right? Especially if you've gone to like trying to live life through just using your mind and finding the right answer. And sometimes people say, I have no freaking idea. I don't know. I don't know what I need. And, what did I want to say with that? I don't know. So I'll do nothing, I guess. Right? And so we present people with a simple question. Would you like to sit or stand? And usually people right away have an answer between those two choices. And then we might say, do you sense that you want to move or be still? And again, they know. Like, we actually just walked through this practice in our Priming the Body for Peace. And people had such big insights from this simple practice of like, how can we support ourselves to get clearer by presenting two options to ourselves and being with those two options and not making it any bigger than that and not making either option wrong. And slowly, you know, after a series of questions, people got to this place of, I know exactly what I need and want right now. Or I know, I have a clear sense of what I'm open to right now. I'm open to experiencing this and seeing what happens and what information I get from my body from doing it this way. And all of a sudden, you took someone who not only said, I don't know what I need, to believing that they have the capacity to know themselves more clearly and have the skill set to help build that sense of inner knowing. Right? And how this relates, I mean, whether you want to sit or stand, you might wonder, like, who cares? Why are we asking ourselves this? But I want to connect it to a question that you and I hear a lot from people, which is, oh, I'm finally learning that my needs matter. Right? I never really held that belief in my life before. And now I have a friend or a boss or a neighbor or a partner who asks me, well, what do you need? Right? They sense I'm overwhelmed or something's off and they ask me, well, what do you need? Or I'm frustrated with them and they're trying to get more clarity from me and they ask me, well, what do you need? And I don't know how to answer the question. And then they feel shame and they feel overwhelmed and all sorts of things. And so when you grow the ability to just be with one or two options and feel into what your body's letting you know about those one or two things, you start knowing more. You also start shifting your self-identity towards believing that I am someone who knows what I want or need. And if I don't know in that moment what I want or need, I trust myself in the discovery process.
Yeah.
All right. I give myself time to discover what that is. And I have the courage to speak up for what I discover.
Mm. Yeah, totally. So now I'm at a place where I can recognize that big overwhelmed feeling. And I'm able to know, oh, that means I need those guardrails. That means I need to narrow things down in some way for myself, whether it's one or two options or a different way, a different structure of thinking about an idea.
Yeah, I find this so helpful in raising my kids and also in partnership, because sometimes I'll ask my kids, like, what do you want for dinner? What do you guys want to do? And I'm just like, they're also like teens, preteens. I don't know. Like, I don't know what to do with that, right? Like, here I am as a mom sort of craving some connection and craving that we could do something that feels enjoyable for all of us. And I get this, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? But I notice when I present one or two options, then we get moving towards what's closer to a fit for all three of us. Right.
I think parents are really good at that, and probably that has to happen pretty commonly. And I think we're really good at doing that for each other and maybe less good at noticing that for ourselves and when that would be helpful for us to do internally.
Yeah. So there we go.
Thanks, Gigi. Anything else you want to say about this concept or free will specifically?
I think I just want to circle back to like the essence of this message, which is noticing how you define things, what beliefs you hold. Are they supporting you? Do they feel limiting and overwhelming? Do they feel spacious? And do they give you a sense of, I can work with this, like from this place, I have a place to go next, right? And if you notice, hey, this belief or this way of seeing the situation doesn't actually feel helpful to me, are you willing to be curious about what else could be helpful? And that actually reminds me of something I wanted to say is, you had said earlier something along the lines of, if I would have been like exposed to a few other perspectives, and I'm going to say free will, in this case of free will, earlier on in my life, maybe I wouldn't have felt so stuck. Maybe I would have felt sturdier earlier. Maybe I would have felt like more able to make choices in my life. And so that for me reminds me of, are we willing to be curious about what the possibilities are and what else could I make this mean? What other belief could be more true for me or more supportive for me? What other way of looking at this or defining this could impact me in a way that is better feeling for me? And in order to be exposed to more perspectives, we have to be open and we have to be curious. And notice for yourself how openness and curiosity shows up or doesn't show up. And like where you go to seek out different perspectives. Like, are you open to asking people what their perspectives are? Are you like, and how do you do that? Is that in informal conversation? Is that like scouring the internet? Like however you want, like there's so many ways to access different perspectives. Are you open and do you actively seek out different perspectives? Or are you living by an old definition of something that makes you feel like crap and not doing anything about it in a way that's going to support you in your life?
Yeah. I feel like we should do a whole episode on how we seek perspectives, because you and I are very different about that as well. And everyone will discover they have their ways that they weren't even noticing. And there's always so many more options than we know.
Juicy.
Thanks, Gigi.
And like juicy. My shoulders are doing the thing again.
They're wiggling.
And I notice that playful shoulder wiggling is different than juicy and excitable shoulder wiggling.
Yes.
One thing can mean so many different things and can feel so many different ways.
Do you have a closing practice in mind?
And I think it's going to be wiggle with a different energy. A different wiggle,
Can
right?
you please assign me an energy?
Yeah, so juicy and exciting. If you feel excitable about something and something like juicy, oh, there's more to discover here. See? The look is different. The energy is different. The wiggle is different.
True.
We need an encyclopedia of wiggles.
It's fun for me. I like being assigned tasks. I remember a few episodes ago, I asked you to whistle like sadly or whistle with an accent or whatever. So yeah, wiggling, like, could I wiggle Irishly? Could I wiggle like a block of wood? These are the things I'm curious about.
I think this could be a whole episode, but I want to come back to tying this, what you're just saying. You asked something so important here. You said, what'd you say? Can you give me something?
Assign me a task.
Assign me a task. Got it. When you said assign me a task, really what you're saying is, can you put the guardrails and the lanes in place? Right? Like make it smaller for me.
Yeah.
And what I love about that, and I'm seeing this in you over time, this transformation, is you own the fact that you can feel overwhelmed when something's not clearly defined or when there's, like you said, too many options. And so because you own that without any shame, right? Where maybe in the past there was shame and judgment, you can very easily say to me, okay, like I'll wiggle, but like give me some guidance here. define it more for me. Give me a task, assign me a task. And all of a sudden it allows you to engage in a different way.
Yeah.
Right? Immediately.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I want to say this other thing, but like we were supposed to only spend 20 minutes talking.
Go ahead.
Okay, maybe Steph will edit this part out and it'll create something else. But this reminds me of when, you know, you live on Salty, Shay lives on Salty. Like in my mind, it's so obvious. Go hang out and go have dinner with her, right? And I remember thinking at a time where, like, I was like, oh, I think it'd be really nice for Steph to have a little bit more connection. Like, Shay just lived there. Her door's always open. Go have dinner. And I think, you know, I even suggested that to you. I talked to Shay about it. She thought it was a great idea. And then it wasn't until later, weeks later, months later, where we sat and we talked about it a little bit. And you told me, and like, you're going to be able to tell this better, but like, that's when I became aware that like, that felt really big and broad and vague. And I think you said, well, if I don't know like what my role is, what the task is, or what the job is, it just feels weird. And
yeah.
And can you say more about that? And like what helped you actually feel more comfortable and like welcome in her home, even though like the invitation was always there. I knew it, she knew it, but like it landed differently for you.
This has been coming up for me this week as well. You might say it's been plaguing me. I'm great socially once it's happening. I just don't know how to cause the social thing to happen. My home growing up was not just, just come on over. It was like, come over for something. Come over because of something. Come over to do something. So without that, I'm just like, I don't understand. Like when someone's like, come over anytime, I'm like, immediately, I'm like 4 a.m, unannounced. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I literally don't know what you're talking about. And I still don't, you know, I know here are the steps to go over to Shay's. But if it's like, oh, just shoot me a message, then I'm like, but if you don't reply to the message has been shot. Is that the rule? I still definitely battle with this. Like it's not natural to me at all. It's work.
And like, this is the sweetness of getting to know our people more and more. And coming from a place of curiosity and not assuming that just because it's simple and clear to me, that would be simple and clear to you, and was simple and clear to Shay and I, and like obviously wasn't in your experience. It didn't seem simple. Like this thing that we thought would help you feel more supported, maybe just actually caused more confusion and overwhelm, because I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. And it was really funny because as I started to clue in, I'm like, oh, and I think I clued in because you told me, like, you're like, I need a task. And I was like, the light bulbs went off for me. So I don't think Shay and I have ever told you this, but now I'm telling you this on live on a podcast. I texted her. I said, I get it now. She needs a task. Can you ask her to come over and do something?
Oh, yes.
She's like, oh, yeah, I can do that.
It's work for her. Like maybe she should hire me to work at her house, then I'll come over.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think that it never occurred to her. It never occurred to me. Like, all I thought was necessary was for you to know that Shay would love if you stop by anytime. You're welcome to join for dinner anytime.
Amazing.
But that was not the thing.
And that's such a big one too, right? Like my family, it was like, no one is just stopping by for dinner. Like you'd have to create another portion. Like no one's prepared for that. Something needs, and I don't operate that way at all. I'm like, just come over anytime. Like I have the same thing she does, but I don't know how to apply it to myself for other people. Yeah. I'm learning how to apply it to myself.
I love it. And then again, you don't know this, but behind the scenes, we were texting each other. And then I knew in the end that you did go over for dinner sometime, like it was some time ago. And I was like inside, I did the little wiggle. I'm like, oh, it
worked. Adorable.
Yeah. Friends helping lovely. Friends.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. I need help.
Yeah, and we could have just stopped with, well, what's Steph's problem? Like, she already knows she's welcome. She never shows up. And we could have, and this is, I think we do this often, is we assume things. Well, she must not want to come then. Right?
Yeah.
And that wasn't the issue.
That's the way. Yeah. I really need to go over there.
Yeah. So
last time I went over there, it's because I had to return a light. I'm like, I understand this. Off I go with my light. And she's like, oh, hey, what are you doing here? Like, I am returning a light.
And all of a sudden, it all felt right.
It did. Yeah.
Nice. I like it. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate you very much. Thank you for understanding me and helping others to understand me.
I love it. I love it.
All right. We did a closing practice, did we? We just veered off of it. We were wiggling. We were doing juicy and excitable wiggles, and then those wiggles turned into more conversation. I love it. I love us, and I love you. Okay, we're gonna wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. And as always, please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share it with somebody that you care about. See you next time.
Bye.